At long last, the day has come when I don't have to see your face anymore. Freeloaders who just eat without working should get out. You should be thankful for being allowed to be a freeloader all this time. Understood? I won't come back. Thank you for everything up to now. I quickly packed what I needed and left my in-laws' place where I had been living for many years. My mother-in-law looked very pleased as she watched me leave. However, only I know a certain sad truth. I know what's going to happen to this house. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old and I work from home. I've been married to my husband Alan for 5 years. We had a peaceful life as a couple, but things changed in our 4th year of marriage. My normally healthy father-in-law suddenly became ill and needed care. That's how we started living with my in-laws. I didn't agree with the idea of living with them so soon, but my husband is an only child with no other family for my in-laws to rely on. We ended up taking care of my father-in-law. I thought about quitting my job if it were necessary for his care, but based on my past performance, my company allowed me to continue working remotely. Trouble with my in-laws started right away. Yes, I experienced the so-called mother-in-law and daughter-in-law problem too. Sarah, hurry up and take care of the cooking and cleaning. How long are you going to be lazy and avoid your housework, mother-in-law? I'm working right now. What are you talking about? You're always just clicking away on the computer. The truth is, you're just browsing the internet, not really working. Right. Thinking that using the computer equates to playing around on the internet is so outdated. I have permission to work from home from my company. In between the household chores and caring for my father-in-law, I've used my skills to get back to the salary I was earning before. And after about 3 months of hard work, when I finally managed to bring my salary back to the amount before, I felt a real sense of joy. As for the reason that I worked so hard, the truth is, Alan's salary isn't enough for us to make ends meet. I had thought that life was finally going to get easier. I even thought about starting to put money away. But for some reason, things just kept getting harder. It felt like the contents of my wallet just kept dwindling. Suspicious, I looked into where the money was going and found out that Alan had been spending a lot. I also learned that my mother-in-law was terribly wasteful with money. Alan has always been a people-pleaser, often treating his juniors at work to lunch. But lately, it seems that he's also been using our credit cards to treat people to drinking parties as well. It doesn't matter how much I earn. If Alan uses more than that, our finances will inevitably dwindle. As for my mother-in-law, she's balancing multiple hobbies with her friends, generously paying the lesson fees, and socializing afterwards. I can't stand the fact that my husband and mother-in-law continue their wasteful spending, leaving all the housework and care for my father-in-law to me. I've ended up having to cover all our living expenses with my income, making saving money a dream. Feeling anxious about this problem, I decided to talk to my husband and mother-in-law. Alan, mother-in-law, it seems like we've been spending quite a lot lately. If this continues, we'll run out of money. Could you please try to cut back on your expenses? Ellen and my mother-in-law reacted harshly to my words. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be seen as stingy in front of my colleagues and subordinates. You can understand that, right? They won't think you're stingy just because there are times where you don't pay for them. There's no need to treat them every single time. You don't seem to understand. But for work to go smoothly, you have to keep good relationships with your coworkers. Treating your juniors to lunch is one thing, but what about the trips to the girls' bars? That has nothing to do with work, right? You just want to have fun, don't you? How dare you come home drunk and start talking about it even if no one asks you? That just means he has a more enjoyable time there than spending time with you. I'm glad that Mom understands, and she's right. And as for me, if I didn't go to my classes, I'd just be cooped up at home. I'm taking classes with my friends to enjoy the limited time I have left in this world. What a terrible daughter-in-law I have. All you do is the housework, and you don't earn anything, so you have no right to complain. Really, though, what is she thinking? A homemaker looking down on us from her high horse. I'm telling you, I'm working. I'm earning a steady income and contributing to this household. I'm also doing housework and taking care of father-in-law. Don't lie, working from home. You can't be earning that much. Mother is the one doing the living. Don't act so high and mighty for a part-timer. I was so appalled by what I was hearing I couldn't even reply. They didn't seem to understand that I was balancing the housework with caregiving, all while earning a steady income. Moreover, it seemed that my mother-in-law had told Alan that she was the one taking care of my father-in-law, making it sound like I was a homemaker who did nothing. There were several times when I thought about leaving that house. I did consider it, but the reason I ended up staying was because of my father-in-law. Ever since I got married, my father-in-law always treated me very kindly, unlike Alan and my mother-in-law. He always told me things like this. Sarah, I'm grateful to have a wonderful daughter-in-law like you. I'm sorry for everything, father-in-law. I don't find it hard to care for you. Why would you say that? Of course I feel bad asking you to take care of me like this, but more than that, I feel terrible about my wife and son. Everything's been left to you, and they do as they please, right? Yes, that's right. I realize that it's thanks to your hard work that our household finances are being kept afloat. Ellen's income alone wouldn't be enough to maintain this household, father-in-law. You knew all this time. It seemed that father-in-law had understood our family's situation for quite some time, and every time he received care, he would show his appreciation with heart-warming words. I truly loved such a father-in-law, and even came to enjoy caring for him. What would happen to this house if I left? I had anxiety about who would take care of my beloved father-in-law, so I decided to be the one to provide proper care until he passed away. A year later, my father-in-law left this world. During the funeral for my beloved father-in-law, I couldn't stop the tears. Sarah, why are you crying so much? What? Father-in-law has passed away. Isn't mourning like this natural? I've been his caregiver all this time. My response seemed to infuriate my mother-in-law. You make it sound as if I never took care of him at all. The truth is, my mother-in-law hardly took care of my father-in-law. She was always busy with her hobbies, going out all the time. Since I was home, she didn't need to do any caregiving or housework. She even put on a tearful act in front of the relatives, as if she were the oppressed and pitiful mother-in-law. To outsiders, it probably seemed as if I was the cruel daughter-in-law. They would defend her, saying, "Don't be so hard on mother-in-law," and blame me instead, even though I was just mourning my father-in-law's death. I was being criticized by people who understood nothing, which made me angry. I decided to distance myself from the relatives. That's when Ellen took notice of me and came over to complain. "You embarrassed Mom in front of everyone." "What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. I was only crying about father-in-law's death." Despite that, your mom came over and told me it was strange for me to cry. Didn't you make it sound like she hadn't taken care of Dad at all? I never said such a thing. I just talked about mourning the loss of my father-in-law, whom I had always cared for. Perhaps it sounded like criticism to you because in reality, your mom did nothing. Are you insulting Mom? I'm not insulting anyone. I'm just stating the facts. And by the way, if it bothers you so much, you could have done more to care for father-in-law too. If you're so upset about it, you should have cared for him yourself. What business is it of yours? Why are you criticizing me? How can it be none of my business? It's only natural that you, his blood relative, would take care of him. I'm working for this family, taking care of the house. Our relatives are wife duties. That's absurd. Don't be so ridiculous. I'm working too, you know. Our argument escalated, and the relatives had to intervene. Although they stopped our argument, I didn't speak to my husband at all after that. Once all the funeral proceedings were finished, a lawyer came to explain the inheritance. I'd like to discuss the contents of the will regarding your late father's estate first, to the wife and the daughter-in-law, Sarah. He's left half of his cash to each of you and to his son, Ellen. He's left ownership of the family land and home. What if Ellen gets the land and the house? Doesn't that mean all the other assets go to the wife? Why is Sarah receiving an inheritance? I'm his wife. Your husband was deeply grateful to Sarah for the dedicated care that she gave him. He wanted to give her part of the inheritance as a sign of his gratitude. As this is the decision he made, it cannot be changed. I can't believe it. Oh, I get it. You were caring for him just to get the inheritance, weren't you? How could you think that? That has to be it. Otherwise, there's no way you could have been so devoted to him despite not being related by blood. I had a good relationship with my father-in-law ever since I got married. I took care of him to express my gratitude for that. Are you saying that you tried to let me, someone who isn't related by blood, take care of your own husband? Isn't that like psychological abuse? Don't be ridiculous. Fine, I won't bring it up anymore. Appearing frustrated that she couldn't say anything else inappropriate in front of the lawyer, my mother-in-law continued, So, that was Dad's decision. It's grand gratitude for Sarah's caring, right? If that's the case, then we have no choice but to follow it. May I continue? All right. Well, your father stated that it's no longer necessary to rely on Sarah. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law's face, which had been dissatisfied just moments ago, suddenly broke into a smile. Yes, that's great. I understand. Huh? What do you mean? My mother-in-law seemed pleased, but my husband was confused. He didn't seem to understand what she was saying. So in the end, Sarah's inheritance is nothing more than severance pay. It's not gratitude at all. Now that Dad's living is over, we don't need Sarah in this house anymore. My mother-in-law had misunderstood my father-in-law's will just as intended. The truth is, my father-in-law had discussed this with me before. My father-in-law wanted me to be free from this house after he passed away. He used the will to cleverly deceive my husband and mother-in-law, making it seem natural that I should leave. And just as my father-in-law had planned, my mother-in-law, completely misunderstanding his true intentions, saw the will as a chance to kick me out. Pretending to be shocked by the will so as not to let on that I actually wanted to leave, I said, Father-in-law, why would you treat me like this? See, even to Dad, you were just someone that would take care of him. Ellen, you can't understand Sarah anymore, right? Why don't you just divorce her? My husband thought about it for a while and then said, You know what? Let's get a divorce. I've inherited the family home and land, and Mom got some money too. There's no longer any need to worry about living, so there's no problem if Sarah goes. Huh? What do you mean by that? Just what I said. I feel bad for asking, but could you leave our house and agree to the divorce? Understood. I guess there's no place for me here anymore. Saying such with a bit of restraint, I took a document out of the drawer and handed it to my husband. After that time we fought, I went and got this. No mistake. The document was a notice of filing for divorce. My husband promptly signed it. Finally, I don't have to deal with you anymore. A non-working freeloader should just get out. LS, you should be grateful for us having put up with you. A total freeloader. Is that so? Okay, I understand. I'll leave. Thank you for everything up to now. Won't. By the way, since the lawyer is here, I want to check one thing. It's okay that I don't get any more than what I've already received from father-in-law's estate, right? Of course. You seem to have gotten a bit smarter, Sarah. You've been living off me until now, so don't even think about squeezing any more money out of me. Well, I suppose you're right. All right, it's settled then. Please make yourself disappear quickly. I promptly packed my things and left my in-laws' house. Watching me leave, my mother-in-law looked as pleased as could be. They had no idea what would happen to this house in the future. After leaving my in-laws' house, I immediately submitted the divorce notice to City Hall, and when I arrived at the apartment, I had rented in advance. I couldn't help but shout out loud in the spacious room, "Finally, I can be by myself. This is great." I was overwhelmed with joy to be freed from such a difficult marriage, and I was truly grateful to my father-in-law for devising the plan to help me escape my in-laws' home. Afterwards, I enjoyed a comfortable life living on my own. Because I was able to get used to working remotely while living at my in-laws' place, I had become better at managing my time, and work went smoothly. Thanks to that, my income increased, and I was living a comfortable life without anyone bothering me. Until one day, my ex-husband Alan called me. "It's been a while. Why are you calling me?" "We're in a pinch, Sarah. Please help us." "What kind of joke is this? Weren't you the ones who told me to disappear?" "My salary hasn't changed, but for some reason we're running out of money. We can't live like this." "Oh dear. That's a problem, isn't it?" I decided to deliver the final blow. "That's because you no longer have my income to support you." "Huh? What do you mean? You still don't get it? Didn't you notice while living so lavishly that your salary alone was not enough?" "I had thought that we could live on my salary alone, but you're telling me that's not the case?" "Of course. You squandered your entire salary on yourself." "We only got by because I was the one paying for our living expenses. Maybe it's about time you and your mother learned some financial responsibility as adults." "How much were you making then?" "Let's see. At that time, I was making about $4,800 a month. Maybe that's more than me." "That's right. You didn't know, did you? By the way, now I'm earning even more than that, with no one to get in my way." Even through the phone, I could clearly feel my husband's frustration. "Hey, Sarah, can't we start over? It was a mistake to let you go. I want to make things right again." Huh? It's obvious you're after my income. Are you stupid?" "That's not true. I still love you, Sarah." "Don't be ridiculous. I never want to see your face again. By the way, what happened to the inheritance your mother received? With that amount, she should be living comfortably, right?" "That's the thing. It's about to run out." "That's impossible. It was nearly $100,000, right?" That's not an amount you can use up in just a few months. Mom and I spent it on a shopping spree, overseas trips, and half of it disappeared in the casino. A foolish mother breeds a foolish son. I have nothing more to say to you. Besides, I'm a stranger now, so I can't do anything for you, and I don't want to. Don't be so heartless. Help me. This has nothing to do with me. There's nothing more to talk about." Saying this, I ended the call on my end and promptly canceled the contract for the mobile phone I was using. What became of my ex-husband and mother-in-law afterward is none of my business, and I do not know. However, about a year after that call, I passed by my mother-in-law's house, and it had become an empty lot. They probably had to let go of the house due to financial reasons. Well, it's really none of my business. Anyway, as for me, with my newfound spare time, I started going to a wine class that I had been interested in for some time. There, I met a man 2 years my senior who took me seriously, and after dating for a year and a half, we got married. He is the ace of a well-known company that many people are aware of, and despite his high salary, he is humble with a warm and wonderful character. He respects my career, and we enjoy a fulfilling married life filled with mutual respect. These days, I feel that maybe all this retribution was a gift from my father-in-law.
To the empire we'll build, Grant declares, his voice booming through the microphone. The crystal champagne flute trembles in my hand as I force a smile. Across the room, Vivian's calculating gaze sends a chill down my spine. My name is Lena, and tonight marks the beginning of my husband's reign as president of Whitmore Industries. It should be a moment of triumph, but all I feel is dread. The ballroom of the Whitmore mansion glitters with wealth and ambition. Executives in tailored suits mingle with socialites dripping in diamonds. I stand beside Grant, playing the part of the supportive wife, but I've never felt more alone.
Speech.
Speech, someone calls out. Grant grins, basking in the attention. Friends, family, esteemed colleagues, he begins. This is just the start. With your support, we'll take Whitmore Industries to heights my father never dreamed possible. Polite applause ripples through the crowd. I catch Clark's eye across the room. His smile doesn't quite reach his eyes. And of course, Grant continues, wrapping an arm around my waist, I couldn't do it without my beautiful wife, Lena. The spotlight shifts to me. I plaster on my best smile, acutely aware of Vivian's disapproving frown. Thank you all for coming, I say, my voice steadier than I feel. We're so grateful for your support. As the party resumes, Grant is quickly swept away by a group of investors. I find myself drifting towards the bar, desperate for a moment of peace. Quite the spectacle, isn't it? Clark appears beside me, his voice low. I nod, grateful for his presence. It's overwhelming. How are you holding up, Lena? He asks, genuine concern in his eyes. Before I can answer, Vivian materializes, her perfectly coiffed hair gleaming under the chandeliers. There you are, she says, her tone sharp. Grant's looking for you. The Hendersons want a photo. I suppress a sigh and follow her across the room. As we walk, Vivian leans in close. Remember your place, Lena, she hisses. This is Grant's moment. Don't embarrass us. The words sting, but I've learned to hide my reactions. I paste on another smile as we approach Grant and the Hendersons. There's my girl, Grant says, pulling me close. His breath smells of expensive scotch. Mr. Henderson was just telling me about an exciting new opportunity in Singapore. I nod politely, my mind racing. Singapore? We'd never discussed moving overseas. As the night wears on, I find myself retreating to a quiet corner. The constant smiling, the vapid small talk, it's all becoming too much. You look like you could use this, a familiar voice says. Maya appears, offering me a glass of water. My savior. I murmur gratefully. Maya's eyes narrow as she surveys the room. How are you really doing, Lena? And don't give me that I'm fine bullshit. I hesitate, torn between loyalty and honesty. It's complicated. I finally admit. Grant's different lately. More distant. And Vivian is still a nightmare? Maya finishes. I can't help but laugh. You could say that. Our conversation is cut short as Grant's voice booms through the speakers once more. If I could have everyone's attention, please. The crowd quiets, all eyes turning towards the makeshift stage. Grant stands there, looking every inch the powerful CEO in his tailored suit. I want to thank you all again for being here tonight, he says. But there's one more announcement I'd like to make. My stomach twists. This isn't part of the plan we discussed. As we embark on this new chapter for Whitmore Industries, we need to streamline our operations, Grant continues. Which is why I've decided to bring in some fresh blood to our executive team. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. I catch sight of Vivian, her face glowing with pride. Please join me in welcoming our new Chief Operating Officer, Grant says, gesturing towards the wings. Tessa Monroe. A statuesque blonde glides onto the stage, her red dress clinging to every curve. She beams at the crowd, then turns to plant a kiss on Grant's cheek. The room erupts in applause, but I barely hear it over the roaring in my ears. I've never seen this woman before in my life. As Tessa begins to speak, I feel Maya's hand on my arm. "Lena," she whispers, "are you okay?" I shake my head, unable to form words. Across the room, I lock eyes with Vivian. Her triumphant smirk tells me everything I need to know. This isn't just a new chapter for Whitmore Industries. It's the beginning of the end of my marriage. As the party continues around me, one thought crystallizes in my mind: I will not go down without a fight. The harsh fluorescent lights of the Whitmore Industries office buzz overhead as I pore over the latest financial reports. It's been 2 weeks since Grant's promotion party, and the cracks in our relationship are widening by the day. "Lena, did you finish those projections?" Grant's voice crackles through the intercom, impatient and distant. I suppress a sigh. "Almost done. I'll bring them in 5 minutes. "Make it 3, he snaps before cutting the connection. As I gather the papers, my eyes catch on a photo on my desk, Grant and me on our honeymoon, carefree and in love. It feels like a lifetime ago. I knock on Grant's office door, steeling myself for another tense interaction. "Come in," he barks. I enter to find Grant hunched over his computer, barely glancing up as I approach. "Here are the projections you asked for," I say, placing the folder on his desk. He grunts in acknowledgement, still not meeting my eyes. "What about the Henderson account? Any progress there?" "I've scheduled a meeting for next week. They seem interested in expanding their investment." Grant finally looks up, a flash of approval in his eyes. "Good. That's good work, Lena." For a moment, I see a glimmer of the man I married. But it's gone in an instant as his phone buzzes. He snatches it up, a small smile playing on his lips as he reads the message. "That'll be all." He dismisses me with a wave of his hand. As I turn to leave, a slip of paper falls from the folder. I bend to pick it up, freezing as I realize what it is: a receipt for a diamond necklace from Tiffany's. A necklace I've never seen. "What's this?" I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Grant's head snaps up, his eyes widening as he sees the receipt in my hand. "It's nothing," he says quickly. "Just a business expense." "A $50,000 business expense." I counter, my heart pounding. He stands abruptly, snatching the paper from my grasp. "I said it's nothing, Lena. Don't you have work to do?" I leave his office in a daze, my mind racing. As I settle back at my desk, my phone lights up with a text from Maya. "Lunch today? We need to talk." An hour later, I'm sitting across from Maya at our favorite cafe, picking at a salad I can't bring myself to eat. "Spill," Maya demands, her eyes filled with concern. "What's going on with you and Grant?" I hesitate, then the words tumble out in a rush. I tell her about Grant's distant behavior, the suspicious receipt, the growing pit in my stomach. Maya listens intently, her frown deepening. "Lena," she says gently, "I hate to say this, but there are rumors." My heart sinks. "What kind of rumors?" She takes a deep breath. "People have seen Grant with another woman. Multiple times. Always very close." The world seems to tilt on its axis. I knew things weren't right, but hearing it confirmed is like a punch to the gut. "Who?" I managed to choke out. Maya shakes her head. "I don't know her name, but she's apparently new to the company. Tall, blonde, always dressed to the nines. Tessa Monroe." The pieces start to fall into place, and I feel sick. "What are you going to do?" Maya asks, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I straighten my shoulders, a spark of determination igniting within me. "I'm going to find out the truth. And then, I don't know." As I return to the office, I notice hushed conversations stopping abruptly as I pass. Sympathetic glances follow me down the hallway. I've become the object of pity, and the realization burns. I throw myself into work, determined to prove my worth beyond being Grant's wife. Hours fly by as I meticulously comb through accounts, finding discrepancies and inefficiencies that have been overlooked. It's past 9 when I finally look up from my computer. The office is deserted, save for a light still burning in Grant's office. Taking a deep breath, I gather my courage and knock on his door. No answer. I push it open slowly, ready to leave the files on his desk. But the sight that greets me stops me cold. Grant is there, but he's not alone. Tessa Monroe is perched on his desk, her legs crossed provocatively as she leans in close to him. They spring apart as the door creaks, guilt written across their faces. "Lena," Grant exclaims, his voice strained. "What are you still doing here?" I stand frozen in the doorway, my eyes darting between them. The diamond necklace glitters at Tessa's throat, mocking me. I say slowly, my voice steadier than I feel, that I'm finally seeing things clearly. Without another word, I turn and walk away, leaving Grant's protests echoing behind me. As I step into the cool night air, a strange calm settles over me. The facade has cracked wide open, and there's no going back. It's time to decide what kind of life I want to build from the rubble. I fumble with my keys, exhaustion weighing heavily on my shoulders as I finally unlock the front door. The house is eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling in my mind. I've spent the last few hours driving aimlessly, trying to process what I saw in Grant's office. "Grant." I call out, my voice echoing through the empty foyer. No response. As I step into the living room, I freeze. A statuesque blonde is lounging on my couch, swirling a glass of red wine, my favorite vintage. Well, she drawls, her lips curving into a predatory smile. The little wife finally comes home. My heart pounds as recognition dawns. "Tessa Monroe," I say, my voice barely above a whisper. She stands, smoothing down her designer dress. "In the flesh. I was beginning to think you'd never show up. What are you doing in my house?" I demand, finding my voice. Tessa laughs, a tinkling sound that grates on my nerves. "Oh, honey, I think we both know this isn't really your house anymore." I clench my fists, fighting to maintain composure. "Where's Grant?" "Out," she says dismissively. "Damage control, I'm sure. Your little scene at the office caused quite a stir." Anger flares within me. "My scene? You're the one who what?" Tessa interrupts, her eyes glittering dangerously. "Who saw an opportunity and took it. Face it, Lena. You were holding Grant back. He needs a partner who can keep up with his ambitions. And you think that's you?" I scoff. She shrugs, the diamond necklace, my necklace, catching the light. "I know it's me. Grant and we understand each other. We're building an empire together." The words hit me like a physical blow, echoing Grant's toast from that fateful party. I open my mouth to retort, but the sound of the front door opening cuts me off. "Lena?" Grant's voice calls out, tinged with panic. "Are you here? We need to talk." He stops short as he enters the living room, his eyes darting between Tessa and me. "What's going on here?" he asks, his face pale. Tessa slinks over to him, wrapping an arm around his waist. "Just getting acquainted with the soon-to-be ex-Mrs. Whitmore," she purrs. I watch as Grant flinches, guilt flashing across his face. But he doesn't push Tessa away. "Lena, I can explain," he starts, but I cut him off with a bitter laugh. "Explain what, Grant? How you've been lying to me, cheating on me, making a fool of me in front of everyone we know." He takes a step towards me, hands outstretched. "It's not like that. Things just happened. I never meant to hurt you." "Save it," I snap. "I don't want to hear your excuses." The tension in the room is palpable, crackling like electricity. But before anyone can say another word, the front door swings open once again. "Grant? Lena? Is everything all right?" Vivian's imperious voice rings out. "I saw both your cars outside, and—" She stops abruptly as she takes in the scene before her. For a moment, shock registers on her face. Then, to my utter disbelief, she composes herself and turns to Tessa with a warm smile. "Tessa, darling," she coos, embracing the other woman. "I didn't expect to see you here. I feel like I've stepped into some bizarre alternate reality." "You've got to be kidding me," I mutter. Vivian turns to me, her eyes cold. "Lena, dear, I think it's time we had a frank discussion about the future of this family." "The future of this family?" I repeat incredulously. "You can't be serious." I'm always serious when it comes to the Whitmore legacy, Vivian says firmly. Grant needs a partner who can support his vision, who understands the demands of his position. And you think that's her? I gesture towards Tessa, who's watching the exchange with barely concealed glee. Vivian sighs, as if explaining something to a child. Tessa has connections, ambition. She can open doors that you simply can't, Lena. I turn to Grant, searching his face for any sign of the man I married. And you? Is this what you want? He at least has the decency to look ashamed. Lena,
I'm sorry.
But maybe my mother has a point. The company needs. The company? I interrupt, my voice rising. What about our marriage? What about the vows we made? Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good. Vivian interjects smoothly. I'm sure we can come to some sort of arrangement, a generous settlement, perhaps? The realization hits me like a tidal wave. They've planned this. All of them. I'm being neatly excised from the Whitmore family, like a tumor to be removed. Get out, I say quietly. Excuse me? Vivian bristles. I said, get out. I shout, surprising even myself with the force of my words. All of you. This is still my house, and I want you out.
Now.
For a moment, no one moves. Then Grant nods, taking Tessa's arm. Come on, he murmurs. We should go. As they file out, Vivian pauses at the door. Think carefully about your next move, Lena, she warns. Don't do anything rash. The door closes behind them, leaving me alone in the sudden silence. I sink to the floor, my legs no longer able to support me. Tears threaten to fall, but I blink them back furiously.
No.
I won't give them the satisfaction of breaking me. As the shock begins to fade, a new emotion takes its place. Determination. They think they can push me aside? They have no idea who they're dealing with. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning. The Whitmore mansion looms before me, its grandeur now feeling more like a prison than a home. I take a deep breath, steeling myself for the family dinner ahead. It's been a week since the confrontation with Tessa and Vivian, and Grant's pathetic attempts at reconciliation have fallen on deaf ears. As I enter, the tension is palpable. Clark greets me with a warm hug, his eyes conveying silent support. Vivian's smile is brittle as she air kisses my cheek, her perfume cloying and suffocating. Lena, darling, she trills. So glad you could make it. We have much to discuss. Grant emerges from his study, looking haggard. Lena, he says, reaching for my hand. I sidestep his touch, moving towards the dining room. Let's just get this over with, I mutter. The meal is a masterclass in passive aggression. Vivian dominates the conversation, prattling on about company successes and social engagements. I push food around my plate, my appetite long gone. Oh, Lena, Vivian says suddenly, her tone saccharine. I forgot to mention, the Henderson's charity gala is next month. I've taken the liberty of declining your invitation. I'm sure you understand, given the circumstances. The fork clatters from my hand. Excuse me? Vivian sighs dramatically. Well, dear, it would be awkward, wouldn't it? Especially since Tessa will be attending as Grant's +1. I turn to Grant, fury building. Is this true? He at least has the decency to look uncomfortable. Lena, it's not personal. It's just business. Tessa has connections that could really benefit the company. Not personal? I laugh bitterly. You're parading your mistress around at events I've attended for years, and it's not personal? Now, Lena, Vivian interjects. There's no need for hysterics. We're all adults here. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good of the family. The greater good? I stand abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. And what exactly is my place in this greater good, Vivian? To sit quietly at home while my husband flaunts his affair in public. Grant rises, his face flushed. That's enough, Lena. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? My voice rises, years of pent-up frustration finally boiling over. You're the one who threw away our marriage for a cheap fling. Tessa is not a cheap fling. Grant shouts back. She understands me, supports my ambitions. When was the last time you did that? The room falls silent. the weight of his words hanging in the air. I feel as if I've been slapped. I have supported you every step of the way, I say quietly, my voice shaking with anger. I've been your wife, your secretary, your accountant. I've sacrificed my own dreams for yours. And this is how you repay me. Vivian clears her throat. Perhaps it's time we discuss a more permanent arrangement. A divorce settlement that's fair to all parties. I whirl on her. Fair? You want to talk about fair? How about the fact that I've dedicated years of my life to this family, only to be tossed aside like yesterday's garbage? Now. Clark speaks up for the first time, his voice calm but firm. Let's all take a breath here. But I'm beyond taking breaths. Years of suppressed emotions come pouring out. You've never accepted me, have you, Vivian? I've never been good enough for your precious son, or your precious company. Well, guess what? I don't need your acceptance anymore. I don't need any of this. I storm out of the dining room, my heart pounding. As I reach for my coat, I hear footsteps behind me. Lena, wait. It's Clark, his eyes filled with concern. Don't leave like this. I pause, my hand on the doorknob. I can't stay here, Clark. I can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's so clearly not. He nods, understanding in his gaze. I know, but before you go, I want you to know something. You deserve better than this. You deserve to be happy. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. For the first time in years, someone in this family is seeing me, really seeing me. Thank you, I whisper, fighting back tears. As I drive away from the Whitmore mansion, a strange sense of calm washes over me. The confrontation, as painful as it was, has brought clarity. I can't change Grant or Vivian, but I can change my own path. My phone buzzes with a text from Maya. How'd it go? Need me to hide a body? I laugh despite myself, feeling lighter than I have in months. I may have lost my place in the Whitmore family, but I haven't lost myself. It's time to start building a life on my own terms. As I pull into my driveway, a plan begins to form. The Whitmore name may open doors, but I'm ready to kick them down myself. They think they can push me aside? They have no idea what I'm capable of. The game has changed, and I'm done playing by their rules. The morning sun streams through the curtains as I zip up the last of my suitcases. My hands tremble slightly, but my resolve is firm. After last night's disastrous family dinner, I know there's no going back. A soft knock at the door makes me jump. Lena? Grant's voice is hesitant. Can we talk? I take a deep breath, steeling myself. There's nothing left to say, Grant. He enters anyway, his eyes widening at the sight of my packed bags. What are you doing? What does it look like? I snap, hefting a duffel bag onto my shoulder. I'm leaving. Grant's face pales. Leaving? But where will you go? That's not your concern anymore. I brush past him, dragging my suitcase towards the stairs. He follows, his voice tinged with panic. Lena, please. We can work this out. I'll end things with Tessa, I promise. I whirl around, anger flaring. It's too late for that. You've made your choice, Grant. Now I'm making mine. As I reach for the front door, it swings open. Vivian stands there, her face a mask of disapproval. Going somewhere, dear? I straighten my spine, meeting her gaze. As a matter of fact, I am. Goodbye, Vivian. She blocks my path, her voice low and threatening. Think carefully about what you're doing, Lena. You walk out that door, you lose everything. No, I say, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. I'm not losing anything. I'm gaining my freedom. With that, I push past her and step into the sunlight. The weight of years of suppressed emotions lifts from my shoulders as I load my car. I don't look back as I drive away, leaving behind the gilded cage of the Whitmore estate. An hour later, I'm sitting in Maya's cozy apartment, a steaming mug of tea in my hands. She listens intently as I recount the events of the past few days. I'm proud of you, Lena, she says, squeezing my hand. It takes guts to walk away from all that. I nod, fighting back tears. I don't know what to do now. Who am I without the Whitmore name? Maya's eyes light up. You're Lena, the smartest, most capable woman I know. And now you have the chance to prove it to yourself. Her words spark something inside me. For the first time in years, I feel a glimmer of excitement about the future. You're right, I say, sitting up straighter. I've spent so long living Grant's dreams. It's time to focus on my own. Over the next few days, Maya's apartment becomes a war room of sorts. We brainstorm ideas, poring over job listings and business plans. My background in accounting is solid, but it doesn't ignite the passion I'm looking for. It's not until we're planning Maya's sister's baby shower that inspiration strikes. As I coordinate vendors, design invitations, and manage the budget, I realize I'm in my element. Maya, I say, excitement bubbling up. I think I've found it. Found what? My calling. Event planning. It combines everything I'm good at: organization, finance, creativity. And I already have connections in the industry from all those Whitmore galas. Maya grins. It's perfect. You'd be amazing at it. The next few weeks are a whirlwind of activity. I pour myself into research, taking online courses, and reaching out to industry contacts. To my surprise, many are eager to work with me, impressed by my skills and reputation. As I'm sketching out a business plan one evening, my phone buzzes with a text from Clark. Heard the news. Proud of you, kiddo. Let me know if you need anything. His support brings tears to my eyes. At least one member of the Whitmore family still believes in me. The day I receive my first client booking is a milestone. It's a small corporate event, nothing like the lavish galas I'm used to, but it's mine. As I hang up the phone, a sense of accomplishment washes over me. I did it, I whisper to myself. I'm really doing this. That night, as Maya and I celebrate with a bottle of wine, my phone rings. It's Grant. My hand hovers over the screen, tempted to ignore it, but something compels me to answer. Lena, his voice is strained. I heard about your new business. Congratulations. Thank you, I say cautiously. There's a long pause. I miss you, he finally says. The company, it's not the same without you. Maybe we could. No, Grant. I interrupt, my voice firm. I'm building something of my own now. Something that doesn't depend on the Whitmore name or your approval. As I end the call, I feel a surge of pride. The road ahead won't be easy, but for the first time in years, I'm excited about the journey. Maya raises her glass in a toast. To new beginnings, she says. I clink my glass against hers, a genuine smile spreading across my face. To new beginnings, I echo. And to the woman I'm becoming. The headline on my phone screen makes me pause mid-sip of my morning coffee. Whitmore Industries stock plummets amid leadership concerns. I can't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction mixed with concern. Looks like your ex is having a rough time, Maya comments, peering over my shoulder. I nod, scrolling through the article. Grant's always been ambitious, but he's in over his head. And Tessa, she's not exactly known for her business acumen. As if on cue, my phone buzzes with a text from Clark. Things are getting messy here. Grant's making rash decisions. Vivian's on the warpath. Be careful. I frown, a knot forming in my stomach. Despite everything, I can't help but worry about the company I dedicated years of my life to. You okay? Maya asks, sensing my unease. I shake it off, forcing a smile. I'm fine. I've got my own problems to focus on, like making sure this charity event goes off without a hitch. The next few days are a whirlwind of activity as I throw myself into planning the annual Children's Hospital Gala. It's my first major event since starting my business, and I'm determined to prove myself. As I'm coordinating with vendors, my phone rings. It's an unknown number. Lena Whitmore speaking. I answer professionally. Lena, it's me. Grant's voice is strained. I need your help. I freeze, caught off guard. Grant?
What's going on?
He sighs heavily. The company's in trouble. We're hemorrhaging money. Investors are pulling out. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to hang up, to tell him it's not my problem anymore. But I can't ignore the years we spent building this company together. What about Tessa? I ask, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Isn't she your partner now? Grant's laugh is hollow. Tessa's idea of crisis management is to throw money at the problem. She's making things worse. I pinch the bridge of my nose, conflicted. I'm sorry, Grant, but I can't just drop everything and come running back. I have my own business now, my own responsibilities. I understand, he says, his voice small. I miss your insight, your steadiness. I've made a mess of things, Lena. The call ends, leaving me with a mix of emotions. I push them aside, focusing on the task at hand. The gala is tomorrow, and I have no time for distractions. The night of the event arrives, and I'm a bundle of nerves. As guests begin to arrive, I scan the room, making sure everything is perfect. The decor is elegant, the music is just right, and the silent auction items are displayed prominently. Lena, a familiar voice calls out. I turn to see Clark approaching, a warm smile on his face.
Clark.
I didn't expect to see you here, I say, genuinely pleased. He chuckles. Wouldn't miss it. You've done an incredible job. As we chat, I notice a commotion near the entrance. My heart sinks as I see Grant stumbling in, Tessa on his arm. They're both clearly intoxicated. Oh no, I mutter. Clark follows my gaze, his expression darkening. I'll handle this, he says, moving towards them. But it's too late. Grant spots me and lurches forward. Lena, he calls out, too loudly. There you are. Always the perfect hostess, aren't you? Tessa giggles, her eyes glassy. Oh look, it's the ex-wife. How quaint. I plaster on a smile, acutely aware of the curious glances from nearby guests. Grant, Tessa, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave. This is a private event. Grant's face contorts with anger. Leave? You can't make me leave. Do you know who I am? A drunk fool making a scene at a charity event. Clark interjects, appearing at my side. Come on, son. Let's go home. As Clark leads him away, I struggle to maintain my composure. The event coordinator in me takes over, smoothing ruffled feathers and redirecting attention to the silent auction. Despite the hiccup, the gala is a resounding success. As the last guests depart, I finally allow myself to breathe. You did it, Lena, Maya says, hugging me tightly. This was amazing. I smile, exhausted but exhilarated.
Thanks, Maya.
I couldn't have done it without you. As we're cleaning up, my phone buzzes with a text. It's from Mrs. Henderson, one of the city's most prominent socialites. Brilliant event, Lena. I'd love to discuss you planning my annual summer soiree. My heart soars. This is the opportunity I've been waiting for. Just then, Clark reappears, looking weary. Lena, we need to talk, he says gravely. Things at Whitmore Industries are worse than you know, and I think you might be the only one who can help. I stare at him, torn between my newfound success and the pull of my past. As the weight of his words sinks in, I realize that the real challenge is just beginning. The question is, am I ready to face it? The Whitmore Industries building looms before me, a glass and steel monolith that once felt like a second home. Now, it's a reminder of everything I've lost and everything I've gained. I take a deep breath, squaring my shoulders as I push through the revolving doors. Clark's words echo in my mind. Things are worse than you know, Lena. We need your help. The elevator ride to the executive floor is tense. As the doors slide open, I'm met with chaos. Employees hurry about, their faces etched with worry. The usual hum of productivity has been replaced by a nervous energy. Lena? A familiar voice catches me off guard. I turn to see Grant, his appearance a far cry from the polished executive I remember. His suit is rumpled, dark circles under his eyes betraying his exhaustion. What are you doing here? He asks, a mix of hope and wariness in his voice. Clark called me, I reply, keeping my tone neutral. He said you needed help. Before Grant can respond, a shrill voice cuts through the air. What is she doing here? Vivian storms towards us, her face a mask of fury. Haven't you done enough damage? I stand my ground, meeting her glare. I'm here because your son and your husband asked for my help, Vivian. Whether you like it or not, I know this company better than anyone. Vivian's eyes narrow, but before she can retort, Clark appears. Thank God you're here, Lena, he says, relief evident in his voice. We need to talk. All of us. The boardroom is eerily quiet as Clark lays out the dire situation. Mismanagement, poor investments, and a series of PR disasters have left Whitmore Industries on the brink of collapse. And where's Tessa in all this? I can't help but ask, noticing her absence. Grant winces. She
left.
took a hefty severance package with her. I bite back a bitter laugh.
Of course she did.
As the meeting progresses, I find myself slipping back into my old role, identifying problems and proposing solutions. It's clear that my intimate knowledge of the company's workings is desperately needed. Hours pass in a blur of spreadsheets and strategy sessions. As night falls, we finally take a break. I step out onto the balcony, needing a moment to clear my head. You're a lifesaver, you know that? Grant's voice startles me. He joins me at the railing, his presence both familiar and foreign. I turn to face him, really looking at him for the first time in months. The arrogance that had consumed him is gone, replaced by a haunted look. Why did you do it, Grant? I ask, the question that's been burning inside me finally spilling out. Was I not enough? He flinches, unable to meet my gaze. I was a fool, Lena. Drunk on power and my own ego. I thought I needed someone who could keep up with my ambitions, but all I did was destroy the best thing in my life. His words hang in the air between us. Part of me wants to comfort him, to fall back into the familiar pattern of our relationship. But I've come too far to go back now. I'm not here for you, Grant. I say firmly. I'm here for the company, for the employees who depend on it. And I'm here for myself, to prove that I'm more than just your wife. He nods, a mix of sadness and understanding in his eyes. I know, and I'm grateful, even if I don't deserve your help. We're interrupted by Vivian, who bursts onto the balcony. What's going on here? She demands, her eyes darting between us suspiciously. Nothing that concerns you, Mother, Grant says wearily. Vivian's face contorts with rage. This is all your fault, she hisses at me. You've turned my son against me, poisoned this company with your influence. I've had enough. Years of pent-up frustration and anger finally boil over.
No, Vivian, y snap.
You did this. Your manipulation, your constant undermining, your refusal to see anyone but yourself as worthy. You're the poison here. The silence that follows is deafening. Vivian staggers back, as if physically struck. For the first time, I see fear in her eyes. Grant steps between us. She's right, Mother, he says quietly. It's time for things to change. As Vivian storms off, I feel a weight lift from my shoulders. I turn to Grant, my decision clear. I'll help save the company, I tell him. But after that, I'm done. I have my own path to follow now. He nods, a mixture of regret and respect in his eyes. I understand. And Lena, thank you. As I walk back into the boardroom, ready to face the challenges ahead, I feel a sense of purpose I haven't experienced in years. The road won't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future, a future I'm building on my own terms. The real work is just beginning, but so is my new life. And I'm ready for both. The buzz of excitement fills the air as I make my final rounds, ensuring every detail is perfect for the grand opening of Lena Whitmore Events. The venue, a renovated warehouse, sparkles with elegant decorations and soft lighting. It's a far cry from the opulent Whitmore galas, but it's mine, and that makes it more beautiful than any crystal chandelier. Maya appears at my side, beaming. Lena, this is incredible. I can't believe how far you've come in just a few months. I squeeze her hand, grateful for her unwavering support. I couldn't have done it without you. As guests begin to arrive, I'm overwhelmed by the turnout. Former colleagues, new clients, and even a few familiar faces from my Whitmore days fill the space. Each congratulation, each word of praise, feels like a validation of my journey. Quite the accomplishment, kiddo, a familiar voice says. I turn to see Clark, his eyes twinkling with pride. Clark, I'm so glad you could make it, I say, embracing him warmly. He looks around, clearly impressed. You've built something special here, Lena. I always knew you had it in you. As we chat, I notice a commotion near the entrance. My heart skips a beat as I see Grant walk in, looking uncertain and out of place. Our eyes meet across the room, and for a moment, I'm transported back to that first party when everything began to unravel. But this time, I'm not the insecure wife standing in his shadow. I'm Lena Whitmore, successful businesswoman and master of my own destiny. Grant makes his way over, fidgeting with his tie. Lena, this is amazing. Congratulations. Thank you, Grant, I reply, surprised by the genuine warmth in my voice. How are things at Whitmore Industries? He nods, a hint of his old confidence returning. Better, thanks to your help. We're not out of the woods yet, but we're getting there. An awkward silence falls between us, years of history hanging in the air. Finally, Grant speaks again, his voice low. I was a fool, Lena. I threw away the best thing in my life because I was too blind to see what I had. I take a deep breath, feeling the last remnants of anger and hurt begin to fade. We both made mistakes, Grant, but I'm grateful for where they led me. He smiles sadly. You deserve all of this, Lena. I'm happy for you, truly. As Grant moves away to mingle, I feel a sense of closure wash over me. The past no longer has a hold on me. I'm free to embrace my future fully. The evening progresses in a whirlwind of introductions, toasts, and potential business discussions. As I circulate, I overhear snippets of conversation that make my heart swell with pride. Did you hear? She single-handedly saved Whitmore Industries. I heard the governor wants her to plan the annual charity ball. She's the one who organized that incredible children's hospital gala. As the night winds down, I find a quiet moment to slip outside. The cool air is a welcome relief after the bustling energy inside. I look up at the stars, marveling at how much has changed in such a short time. There you are, Maya says, joining me. Hiding from your own party? I laugh, just taking a moment to breathe it all in. She links her arm through mine. So, how does it feel to be the toast of a town? I consider her question, searching for the right words. It feels
Right.
like I've finally found my place in the world. Maya nods, understanding in her eyes. You know, when you first showed up at my door that night, I was worried. But look at you now. You're unstoppable, Lena Whitmore. Tears prick at my eyes, but they're tears of joy and gratitude.
Thank you, Maya.
For everything. As we head back inside, I'm struck by a sudden realization. The empire Grant toasted to all those months ago wasn't meant to be his at all. It was mine, waiting for me to claim it. The party begins to wind down, guests departing with warm wishes and promises of future collaborations. As the last few stragglers make their way out, I find myself alone in the center of the room. I close my eyes, savoring the moment. The fear and uncertainty that once plagued me have been replaced by a quiet confidence. I've faced betrayal, heartbreak, and self-doubt, and emerged stronger for it. Opening my eyes, I take in the space around me, the tangible proof of my resilience and determination. This is more than just a business. It's a testament to the power of reinvention, of finding strength in adversity. As I gather my things, ready to close this chapter and open the next, I smile to myself. The journey has been difficult, but the destination has been worth every step. I switch off the lights, casting one last glance over my shoulder at the empty venue. Tomorrow, the Real work begins. But tonight, I'll celebrate how far I've come and dream of how much further I can go. Lena Whitmore, event planner extraordinaire, is just getting started. And the future? It's looking brighter than ever. My name is Sarah, and I'm about to tell you how my life turned into a series of trials that I never expected. I'm in my early 30s now, and when I look back, it feels like I've lived several lifetimes in just a few years. Everything seemed fine when Daniel, my husband, and I were living in Austin, Texas. We had a cozy little home and our 3-year-old son, Jack, who brought so much joy into our lives. Daniel was a financial analyst, and his job often required him to travel. I was used to managing things on my own when he was away, but I never imagined how much more complicated life would become. The first big change came when Daniel's mother, Margaret, moved in with us. Margaret was 65 and had just lost her husband, Daniel's father. Her health wasn't great either. She had arthritis and struggled to live alone. When we offered to have her move in with us, it seemed like the right thing to do. I knew it would be a bit challenging, but I thought we could handle it. At first, things seemed to work out. Margaret was somewhat helpful, and we tried to make her feel at home. But it wasn't long before the situation started to deteriorate. Margaret's behavior changed drastically. What began as small annoyances soon became unbearable. She started leaving dirty dishes in the sink, claiming she'd clean them up later. But later never came. I'd remind her, and she'd apologize, but it was always the same cycle. The mess piled up, and I was left to deal with it. Margaret also began to play mind games. She'd offer to run errands or help with tasks and then conveniently forget or decide she didn't feel like it. It was frustrating, especially when Daniel was out of town. I felt like I was constantly cleaning up after her and trying to manage the household without any help. Every time Daniel was away, Margaret seemed to get worse. It was almost as if she was deliberately making things harder for me. One evening, everything came to a head. A storm was brewing, and the sky was darkening with heavy clouds. I was busy getting Jack ready for bed when Margaret came into the kitchen, where I was trying to tidy up. She started making complaints about the way I'd arranged things, and I tried to keep calm, telling her that I was just finishing up. But Margaret was insistent and rude, and I could feel my patience wearing thin. As the storm raged outside, I tried to ignore Margaret's complaints. But then, things took a turn. Margaret, in a fit of frustration, locked the door and refused to let us back inside. Jack and I were left outside, drenched by the rain. I knocked on the door, pleading with her to let us in, but she just ignored us. It was terrifying, standing there with my little boy, knowing that we had no place to go. Eventually, a neighbor saw us and offered to help. We went to a nearby park, seeking shelter until the storm subsided. I was frantic, holding Jack close, trying to stay calm. When the rain finally let up, the police arrived, having been called by the concerned neighbor. They took us to the local station, where I met with Uncle John, Daniel's uncle. He had been contacted by Daniel, who was worried about the situation with Margaret. Uncle John was a retired lawyer, someone I'd always admired for his wisdom and kindness. He listened patiently as I explained what had happened. He told me that Daniel had been concerned about Margaret's behavior, and that's why he reached out for help. Hearing that Daniel had noticed the problems was a small comfort, but it didn't change the fact that we were in a mess. At the station, Margaret was defensive and dismissive. When Uncle John suggested that I seek legal advice, I felt overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't want to cause trouble or make things worse, but it was clear that something had to change. I was exhausted and heartbroken, not just from the night's events but from the months of escalating tension. The thought of having to deal with this situation alone while Daniel was away was almost too much to bear. This night was just the beginning of what would become a long and difficult journey. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm brewing within our family, and I had no idea what the future held. But one thing was clear: I had to find a way to navigate this chaos and protect my family, even if it meant making hard choices and seeking help I never thought I'd need. After that stormy night, things didn't get any easier. The days that followed were a blur of stress and uncertainty. Uncle John, who had been so kind to help us, gave me a piece of advice I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. I needed to consider legal action to address Margaret's behavior. I felt torn. On one hand, I knew things couldn't continue as they were. On the other hand, taking legal steps against Daniel's mother felt like a betrayal. Back in Austin, the atmosphere in the house was tense. Margaret's attitude remained as difficult as ever. She acted as though nothing had happened, but her passive-aggressive behavior was undeniable. The dirty dishes piled up, and every day seemed to bring new issues. Sometimes it felt like I was living with a ticking time bomb. Her mood swings were unpredictable, and I was constantly on edge, trying to manage everything and keep Jack shielded from the growing conflict. Daniel, who was stationed in New York at the time, called regularly to check in. I would fill him in on the daily struggles, but his calls always seemed to end in frustration. He wanted to fix things but was stuck in a different city, unable to do much beyond offer moral support. I could tell he was feeling the strain, and it was clear that his job was creating a chasm between us. One evening, while Daniel was still away, Margaret pushed me to the brink. She made a mess in the kitchen and then sat in the living room, watching TV loudly, completely indifferent to the noise. I had Jack trying to sleep in the next room, and the noise made it impossible for him to settle down. I asked Margaret to lower the volume, and she responded with a curt, "I'm watching my program." It was clear she wasn't going to cooperate. I tried to stay calm and waited until Jack was asleep before confronting her. I told Margaret that her behavior was making things very difficult for me and asked if she could be a bit more considerate. Instead of acknowledging my concerns, she became defensive and accused me of being ungrateful. It was as though she was intentionally trying to create conflict. That's when I realized that Margaret wasn't just difficult. She was deliberately antagonistic. The realization hit me hard. I had been hoping that things would improve, but they seemed to be getting worse. I decided it was time to take Uncle John's advice seriously. I began looking into legal options, consulting with a lawyer to understand what could be done. The lawyer explained that we could seek a restraining order or consider placing Margaret in a care facility if her behavior became untenable. The idea of a care facility seemed extreme, but the more I thought about it, the more it became apparent that we needed to explore all possible solutions. Meanwhile, I kept in touch with Daniel, trying to keep him informed without overloading him. I knew he was under a lot of pressure at work, and I didn't want to add to his stress. Still, I could see how deeply he cared about what was happening at home. One night, he broke down during a call, admitting that he felt helpless. It was hard to hear him like that, knowing I was dealing with so much on my own. To make matters worse, Margaret started making comments about Daniel's job, accusing him of abandoning her. She knew that he had to travel for work, but she used it as a weapon to make me feel guilty. It was an ugly tactic, and it wore me down. Each day felt like a new battle, and I was growing more exhausted and isolated. The turning point came when Daniel decided to return to Austin for a few days to address the situation. He wanted to see things for himself and help in any way he could. I was hopeful that his presence would bring some relief, but I was also anxious about how it would play out. When Daniel arrived, the tension in the house was palpable. I showed him the mounting problems with Margaret, from the unwashed dishes to the passive-aggressive comments. Daniel listened, but Margaret was in denial. She insisted that she was being treated unfairly and that I was exaggerating the issues. To provide Daniel with a clearer picture, I decided to record one of Margaret's outbursts. I knew it was a risky move, but I needed evidence of the verbal abuse that had become a regular occurrence. I hoped that hearing it for himself would help Daniel understand the gravity of the situation. The night before Daniel was set to leave, we had another intense argument. Margaret was in rare form, her words sharp and unrelenting. I captured it all on my phone. The recording was painful to listen to, but it was necessary to show Daniel the truth. The next morning, Daniel listened to the recording. His face was a mix of shock and sorrow as he heard Margaret's harsh words. It was clear that he was struggling to come to terms with the reality of the situation. I watched as he grappled with the decision that lay ahead. As the days passed, it became increasingly apparent that something had to be done. The storm I'd been through was not just about the weather. It was a symbol of the chaos and turmoil in our lives. And as much as I hoped for things to get better on their own, I knew that we needed to take decisive action to reclaim our lives and our home. With Daniel back in Austin and fully aware of the situation, things started to shift. The recording I had made was a turning point. It was difficult for Daniel to hear his mother's verbal abuse, but it was also necessary. He needed to understand the depth of Margaret's hostility to make informed decisions about her future. After listening to the recording, Daniel and I sat down to discuss our options. It was a heavy conversation, filled with a mix of sadness and frustration. We both knew that our family's future depended on the decisions we made in the coming days. I had no idea it was this bad, Daniel admitted, his voice tinged with regret. I should have been more involved. I just thought. I don't know. Maybe things would get better on their own. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anger. I understand. It's been really hard to handle everything on my own. But now that you're here, we need to figure out what to do next. We talked through our options. The idea of placing Margaret in a care facility was one we had been trying to avoid, but it was becoming clear that it might be the only solution. Her behavior had become so unpredictable and aggressive that it was no longer safe or sustainable for us to continue living together. We decided to consult with a care facility in the area. I reached out to a few places, gathering information about their services and the types of care they offered. It was a daunting process, and I felt overwhelmed by the thought of making such a significant decision. Each facility visit felt like another step toward an uncertain future, but we had to keep moving forward. During this time, Margaret continued her defiant behavior. She was aware of our discussions and became even more combative. She accused us of plotting against her and tried to manipulate Daniel by playing the victim. It was emotionally draining to deal with her constant accusations and threats. One evening, Margaret cornered me in the kitchen. Her eyes were cold and calculating. "You think you can just get rid of me, don't you?" she said sharply. "You and Daniel are trying to push me out of my own son's home." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "Margaret, we're trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Your behavior has made it impossible for us to continue living together. We've looked into care facilities because it's become clear that we need help managing this situation." Her face twisted in anger. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? I'm not some old woman you can just toss aside. I'm your family, too." I walked away, my heart pounding. It was painful to see her like this, but I knew that confronting her only escalated the situation. I needed to focus on what was best for Jack and for our family as a whole. As the days passed, Daniel and I continued to explore care facility options. We finally found one that seemed like a good fit, comfortable, with a staff that appeared compassionate and understanding. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the best option we had. We scheduled a visit to discuss Margaret's potential placement and to ensure the facility could meet her needs. Meanwhile, Daniel had to return to New York for work. It was a bittersweet departure. I felt a sense of relief that he would be back in his routine, but also a pang of anxiety about handling Margaret alone during his absence. We had set a date for Margaret's move to the care facility, and I was dreading the confrontation. The day of Margaret's move was one of the most challenging moments in the entire ordeal. She fought us every step of the way. Her resistance was intense, and it was clear she felt betrayed. Her anger was palpable as we packed her belongings and prepared for her departure. "I can't believe you're doing this to me," Margaret shouted as we loaded her things into the car. "You're tearing apart this family. How could you be so cruel?" I struggled to stay calm. "Margaret, this is not about cruelty. It's about finding a solution that ensures everyone's well-being. We can't continue living like this. You need professional help, and this facility will provide that." Daniel tried to reason with her, but Margaret was inconsolable. The emotional toll was immense. I felt a heavy weight on my shoulders as we drove to the facility, knowing that we were making a difficult decision that would affect all of us. When we arrived, the facility staff were kind and supportive. They took Margaret's belongings and assured us that she would be well cared for. As we left, I could see the sadness in Daniel's eyes. We both knew that this was a necessary step, but it didn't make it any easier. Back at home, the silence was almost overwhelming. The house felt emptier, and the sense of relief was mixed with a deep sadness. I knew that we had done the right thing, but it was hard to shake the feeling of guilt and loss. As I looked around our home, I realized that we had reached a turning point. The storm had passed, but the aftermath was still unfolding. We had taken a crucial step in addressing the issues with Margaret, but the road ahead was uncertain. With Daniel back in New York and Margaret settled in the care facility, I was left to navigate this new chapter of our lives, hopeful that we could finally begin to heal and rebuild. The day we finally left Austin for Italy felt surreal. The house was eerily quiet without Margaret's constant presence, and even though the transition was bittersweet, I felt a profound sense of relief. Daniel and I had worked hard to get everything in order before our move, But as we packed the last of our belongings and prepared to say goodbye, I was filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Jack, who was only 3 but perceptive enough to sense the change, clung to me a bit more than usual. I reassured him with hugs and gentle words, trying to make this big change feel like a new adventure rather than a daunting shift. Daniel was also excited about the opportunity for a fresh start in Italy, but I knew that both of us were carrying the weight of our recent experiences. The flight to Italy was long, and Jack grew restless, but we managed to keep him entertained with toys and games. As we landed in Rome, I was struck by the city's beauty and the sense of possibility it held. It was a stark contrast to the tension and conflict we'd left behind. Our new home was in a charming small town in Italy, surrounded by rolling hills and picturesque landscapes. The change in scenery was breathtaking and immediately soothing. It was a welcome departure from the stress we had been enduring. As we settled into our new house, I felt a flicker of hope that this new chapter would bring the peace and happiness we had been missing. Daniel's job in Italy kept him busy, but it was a different kind of busy than before. His role allowed him more flexibility, which meant he could spend more time with Jack and me. We explored our new surroundings together, and the fresh start began to heal some of the wounds left by our past. I began to make friends in the community. I joined a local mothers group and found comfort in connecting with other parents who understood the challenges of raising a child in a new country. Their support and friendship helped me adjust to life in Italy, and the positive interactions were a welcome change from the negativity we had experienced before. Despite the distance, I kept in touch with Sarah's Uncle John. He was a rock during the turbulent times in Austin, and I valued his continued support. He frequently checked in, offering encouragement and advice as we navigated our new life. As time went on, I noticed that Jack was flourishing in this new environment. The stress of our past seemed to fade as he adapted to his new surroundings with a joyful spirit. The open spaces, the Italian language classes, and the playgrounds became a part of his daily life, and it was heartwarming to see him so happy. The decision to place Margaret in a care facility was one that I still reflected on often. I hoped that the facility was providing her with the care and support she needed. I tried to put aside my feelings of guilt and focus on the fact that we had made the choice out of necessity, not out of malice. It was a decision made in the interest of everyone's well-being, including Margaret's. Daniel and I began to think about the future with renewed optimism. We had faced so many challenges and had come through them stronger. The move to Italy was not just a change in location, but a chance to rebuild our lives, free from the shadows of our past struggles. One afternoon, as I watched Jack playing in the garden, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. The sun shone brightly, and the air was filled with the sounds of laughter and the distant hum of Italian life. The tranquility of our new home was a balm for our souls. Daniel joined us, and we sat together, enjoying a simple meal on the patio. We talked about our hopes and dreams for the future, and for the first time in a long while, the conversation was filled with excitement rather than conflict. As we embraced this new chapter, I knew that the road ahead would not be without its challenges. But we had learned so much about ourselves and each other. We had set boundaries, made difficult decisions, and found strength in each other. The journey had been tough, but it had led us to a place where we could start anew. In the end, moving to Italy was more than just a change of scenery. It was a chance for a fresh start and a new beginning. The echoes of our past struggles were fading, replaced by the promise of a brighter future. With hope in our hearts and a renewed sense of purpose, we were ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, knowing that we had the strength and resilience to face it together.
The fluorescent lights of the hospital room flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. I was propped up in my bed, a myriad of tubes and monitors attached to me, when Ethan walked in. His gait was confident, almost too confident for someone who was supposed to be recovering from major surgery. My surgery. The surgery where I had given him a part of me, quite literally, to save his life. "Laura, we need to talk," Ethan began, avoiding my gaze. His voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of unease. I nodded, bracing myself for what was to come, but nothing could have prepared me for his next words. "I think we should get a divorce." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt as if the ground had been yanked from under me. What? I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan finally met my gaze, his eyes cold and detached. Look, Laura, you can't take care of the house or me anymore. This situation has made it clear. You're not the partner I need. I was stunned into silence. The man who stood before me, the man I had loved and cared for, seemed like a stranger. But I just gave you part of my liver. I saved your life. My voice cracked with emotion, a mixture of disbelief and anger bubbling to the surface. That's just it, Laura. You did save my life, and I'll be forever grateful. But gratitude isn't enough to sustain a marriage. We've been drifting apart for years, and this is just the final straw. His words cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. I had laid on that operating table for him, endured pain and risked my life, and this was how he repaid me? With coldness and divorce papers? You knew what you were signing up for when we got married, I retorted, my anger rising. You promised to be there in sickness and in health. Or does that only apply when it's convenient for you? Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I know what I said, Laura, but people change, situations change. I need to think about my future, and I can't see you in it anymore. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to tell him how unfair this was, but the words died in my throat. Instead, I whispered, So this is it? You're abandoning me when I need you the most? It's not like that, Laura. I can't be the person you want me to be. I'm sorry. Without another word, Ethan turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a heart shattered into a million pieces. As the door clicked shut, a bitter laugh escaped my lips. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. Ethan, the man who couldn't bear the thought of caring for his sick wife, was alive because of me. And now he was walking away, free to live his life, while I lay here, broken and betrayed. In that moment, a fire ignited within me, burning away the remnants of my affection for Ethan. He wanted a divorce? Fine. But I wouldn't make it easy for him. I would fight back, and I would make sure he regretted this day for the rest of his life. The days turned into weeks, and the hospital room felt more like a prison than a place of healing. Each day blended into the next, marked only by the visits from doctors and the occasional obligatory check-in from Ethan's family, who seemed more concerned with his well-being than mine. It was during one of these long, lonely afternoons that I found myself reflecting on the past, on how Ethan and I had arrived at this painful juncture. Our story began at the small publishing firm where we both worked. Ethan, with his keen insight into political affairs, and I, a hopeful comic artist, found ourselves drawn together by our shared ambition and love for the written word. Our relationship blossomed quickly, fueled by late-night discussions about our dreams and aspirations. Ethan was charming, passionate about his work, and seemingly devoted to me. When he proposed, it felt like a dream come true. However, the dream began to crumble soon after our wedding. Ethan's career took off, and he became consumed by his work, leaving me to manage the household alone. Our conversations, once filled with mutual respect and understanding, turned into heated debates about my role in our marriage. You knew what you were getting into when you married me, Laura, Ethan would say whenever I voiced my loneliness or dissatisfaction. I need a partner who supports my career, not someone who needs constant attention. I remember trying to express how isolated I felt, only to be met with dismissal. Laura, you're overreacting. We're doing fine. You just need to find something to keep you busy, he'd respond, his eyes glued to his phone or laptop, never really seeing me. The realization that Ethan saw me more as a convenience than a partner was a bitter pill to swallow. I threw myself into my comics, pouring my heart and soul into the panels, trying to fill the growing void between us. My characters lived vibrant, fulfilling lives, stark contrasts to my own, which seemed to be shrinking with each passing day. It was during a family gathering that Ethan's mother, perhaps sensing my growing despair, pulled me aside. Laura, I'm sorry. Ethan has always been driven, but you don't deserve to be pushed aside. You're family now, and we're here for you, even if he's not. Those words, meant to comfort, only deepened my sense of failure. How had my life become a series of apologies and excuses for the man I loved? Our marriage, once the source of my happiness, had become a facade, I was living with a man who valued his career and social standing more than our relationship. A man who believed my sacrifice and support were simply parts of the role I had agreed to play. The love and partnership I had once believed in had dissolved into a business arrangement, one that Ethan was now seeking to terminate because I had become an inconvenient liability. As I lay in the hospital bed staring at the sterile white walls, I realized that Ethan's request for a divorce wasn't just the end of our marriage, it was my chance to reclaim my life. No longer would I be the silent supporter, the convenient wife. I would fight back, not just for the sake of revenge, but to regain my dignity and self-worth. Ethan thought he could discard me after everything I had done for him, after I had literally given a piece of myself to save his life. But I would show him that I was more than just a caretaker, more than just his wife. I was Laura Barnes, and I would not be underestimated. The resolve that had sparked in me the day Ethan walked out of my hospital room had now turned into a roaring blaze. I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the truth and a newfound strength that Ethan had never seen. The day Ethan was diagnosed with cirrhosis was the day our fragile semblance of a marriage was put to the ultimate test. I remember the cold, clinical tone of the doctor as he explained the severity of Ethan's condition. "Without a liver transplant, Mr. Barnes's prognosis is very poor," he had said, his gaze shifting between Ethan and me. Ethan's reaction was one of sheer denial. There must be some mistake. "I feel fine," he protested, but the evidence was irrefutable. The lifestyle he had led, the endless work events accompanied by heavy drinking, had taken their toll. It was then, in the stark, impersonal hospital room, that Ethan turned to me with a desperation I had never seen in him before. "Laura, you're my only hope. Please, I need you." The weight of his plea hung heavily between us. Despite everything, the part of me that had loved him, that still cared for him on some level, couldn't turn away. "If I'm a match, I'll do it," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The tests confirmed that I was indeed a suitable donor, and the surgery was scheduled. The days leading up to it were a blur of paperwork, medical consultations, and a profound sense of loneliness. Ethan's family thanked me, their gratitude genuine, yet tinged with the unspoken acknowledgement of Ethan's role in his own predicament. "Thank you, Laura. You're doing a brave thing," Ethan's mother had said, her eyes wet with unshed tears. But Ethan's response was markedly different, almost indifferent, as if he considered my sacrifice a mere transaction. "You're saving my career, Laura. I won't forget this," he had said, but the warmth I had once felt for him was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. The surgery itself was a success, at least for Ethan. He recovered quickly, buoyed by the prospect of returning to his life, his career. I, on the other hand, faced complications. The physical pain was nothing compared to the realization that Ethan viewed my suffering as a necessary inconvenience, a stepping stone on his path to recovery. During one of his rare visits to my hospital room, Ethan's true feelings became painfully clear. "You know, this really puts things into perspective. I need to focus on my recovery, on getting back to work. We'll talk about us later," he had said, avoiding my gaze. "Us? What's there to talk about?" "You've made your priorities clear, Ethan," I retorted, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. Ethan had merely shrugged, the gesture dismissive. "Laura, you knew what you were getting into when you married me. My career has always been my priority. You agreed to support me, remember?" That conversation was a turning point for me. It crystallized the stark reality of our marriage. To Ethan, I was nothing more than a means to an end, a convenient solution to his problems. My well-being, my dreams, my sacrifices were irrelevant to him. As Ethan left the room, his footsteps echoing hollowly in the sterile corridor, a resolve hardened within me. I would no longer be the silent, suffering wife. Ethan had taken everything from me, my love, my liver, and now he sought to discard me when I was no longer of use to him. But I would not let him. I would fight back, not just for myself, but for every moment of neglect, every dismissive word, every sacrifice made in vain. Ethan Barnes would learn that my generosity came with a price, one that he would pay dearly. In the sterile ambience of Ethan's lawyer's office, I found myself sitting across from the man I once vowed to spend my life with. Ethan's demeanor was a mixture of impatience and arrogance, a stark contrast to the gravity of our meeting. Without any preamble, He pushed a set of documents toward me. "Let's get this over with," Ethan said, barely hiding his disdain. "I've offered you a fair settlement. Everything is in order." I scanned the documents, my heart sinking with each word. "Fair?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "You think abandoning your wife after she saved your life is fair?" Ethan smirked, a cold glint in his eyes. "I'm just being realistic, Laura. Our marriage was over long before this. It's better for both of us to move on." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension, but Ethan waved him off, his focus solely on me. "Look, Laura, I'm starting a new chapter in my life. I suggest you do the same. Take the settlement. It's more than generous given the circumstances." His words stung, a brutal reminder of the transactional nature of what our marriage had devolved into. "A new chapter? At my expense?" I retorted, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "You owe me for every sacrifice, every ignored plea for attention, every moment of pain." Ethan laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You're delusional if you think you're entitled to anything more. I made you who you are. Without me, you're nothing." That was the last straw. The pain and humiliation I had endured crystallized into a fierce resolve. "We'll see about that, Ethan. You may think you've won, but this is far from over. I'll make sure of it." As I left the office, Ethan's facade of confidence seemed to crack, revealing a flicker of doubt. The battle lines were drawn, and I was no longer the woman he thought he could easily discard. The days that followed were a blur of strategizing and planning. Mark, a colleague and friend, became my ally in the quest for justice. Over coffee one afternoon, I shared the full extent of Ethan's betrayal, my words painting a vivid picture of the man behind the public persona. "He can't get away with this, Laura," Mark said, his anger mirroring my own. "You deserve better. We need to expose him for who he truly is." "I agree," I replied, the weight of my decision heavy on my shoulders. "It's time for some well-deserved karma." Together, we crafted a plan that was both bold and risky. Utilizing Mark's connections, we secured an interview with a prominent online platform known for its investigative journalism. The piece would detail my side of the story, laying bare Ethan's deceit and manipulation for the world to see. On the day the article was published, I felt a mix of fear and vindication. The headline alone, "The Unseen Sacrifice, a Wife's Tale of Betrayal and Bravery," was a testament to the journey I had embarked upon. Ethan's reaction was swift and predictable. His fury came through the phone line, palpable and venomous. "How dare you do this to me, Laura? You'll pay for this." "It's only the truth, Ethan," I responded, my voice calm but firm. "Something you've been running from for far too long." "You think you can destroy me?" "I'll sue you for defamation," he threatened, his voice a blend of anger and desperation. "Go ahead and try," I countered, a sense of empowerment coursing through me. "Everything in that article is the truth, and I have the evidence to prove it. It's your word against mine, and the court of public opinion has already made its verdict." The call ended with Ethan slamming the phone down, but I remained unfazed. I had taken the first step in reclaiming my life and dignity, no longer a silent victim of Ethan's cruelty. As the fallout from the article began to unfold, with Ethan's public image and career taking a hit, I watched from a distance. There was no joy in my heart, only a solemn satisfaction that justice was finally being served. I had started this fight to expose the truth, not for revenge, but to reclaim my voice that Ethan had tried so hard to silence. Now, standing on the precipice of a new beginning, I knew the hardest battles were still ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them head-on. The aftermath of the article's publication was like watching a slow-motion collapse of Ethan's carefully constructed world. My phone buzzed continuously with notifications, texts from old friends, colleagues, and even strangers expressing their support and sharing their own stories of disillusionment and betrayal. It was overwhelming, yet validating. Ethan, on the other hand, found himself in the eye of a storm he could no longer control. The first crack in Ethan's armor appeared publicly when a video of him confronting a journalist went viral. His anger, usually so well masked by charm and wit, was on full display for the world to see. "Why don't you tell the real story about how Laura is trying to ruin my life?" Ethan spat at the journalist, who merely replied, "We're just interested in the truth, Mr. Barnes." The truth. a concept so foreign to Ethan it seemed to enrage him further. His tirade continued, unaware of the cameras recording every word, every gesture of disdain. This was not the Ethan the public knew and admired. This was the man I had lived with, fought with, and ultimately left. As Ethan's public persona unraveled, I received a call from Mark, his voice tinged with excitement and anticipation. "Have you seen the latest? Ethan's self-destructing. Your story has opened the floodgates. People are coming forward with their own experiences." I hadn't anticipated the breadth of the impact. "I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's more than I expected. I just wanted to share my story, not this." Mark was quick to reassure me. "Laura, you did the right thing. Ethan's true colors needed to be exposed. The world needed to see him for who he really is." As Ethan's life spiraled, his attempts to regain control became more desperate and pathetic. Sponsors withdrew their support. His social media became a battleground, and his professional engagements dried up. The man who once held the power to sway public opinion was now a pariah, his words dissected and discredited. The culmination of Ethan's downfall came one evening when I saw him pleading his case on a low-rated talk show, a far cry from the influential platforms he once frequented. "I've been misrepresented," Ethan claimed, his voice lacking its usual conviction. "This is a coordinated attack on my character." But the host was unsympathetic. "The evidence suggests otherwise, Mr. Barnes. Your actions, your words, have led us here. It seems you are your own worst enemy." Watching Ethan flounder, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was no satisfaction in seeing him destroyed, no joy in his suffering. What I felt was a somber recognition of the inevitable conclusion to a story that had started the moment Ethan chose his ambition over our marriage, his ego over our partnership. The chapter closes not with a celebration of victory, but with a quiet contemplation of the cost of truth. Ethan's downfall was a public spectacle, but for me, it was a deeply personal closure to a chapter of my life that had brought me to the brink. I turned off the TV and looked around my quiet apartment, the noise of Ethan's downfall fading into the background. It was time to move forward, to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of self. Ethan's legacy would be one of caution and regret, but mine was still unwritten. And with each passing day, I was finding the strength to write a new chapter, one defined by resilience, dignity, and an unyielding pursuit of truth. Ethan's downfall from grace wasn't just a spectacle. It became a cautionary tale whispered within the corridors of power and across social media platforms. His attempts to salvage his reputation only dug his grave deeper, each denial and accusation against me serving to alienate him further from the court of public opinion. A few weeks after the tumultuous interview, Ethan reached out to me directly for the first time since the article's publication. His voice, once confident and commanding, now carried a note of desperation. "Laura, please," Ethan pleaded over the phone. "We need to talk. This has gone too far. Can't we just meet and sort this out?" His words, meant to sway, only served to remind me of the countless times his promises had fallen flat. "Sort this out?" I echoed, my tone incredulous. "Ethan, there's nothing left to sort. You made your choices." "But I'm losing everything," Ethan stammered, the facade of the unflappable commentator crumbling. "Can't you see? This vendetta of yours is destroying me." I paused, weighing my response. "This isn't a vendetta, Ethan. It's accountability, something you've avoided for far too long." Ethan's reply was a mix of anger and pleading. "I'll make it right, Laura. Just help me stop this madness." "Stop it," I replied, a resolve strengthening within me. "Ethan, the only madness was thinking you could treat people the way you did without consequence. You're on your own." The call ended with a click, and I was left with the silence of my apartment, a stark contrast to the turmoil Ethan was facing. His empire, built on charisma and manipulation, was now just ruins, his legacy tarnished by his own actions. The weeks that followed saw Ethan's public appearances dwindle to nothing. The few platforms that once vied for his insights now shunned him, his name becoming synonymous with betrayal and deceit. Even his social media, once a battleground of support and condemnation, went silent, as if the world had moved on, leaving Ethan Barnes a mere footnote in a relentless news cycle. But the true extent of Ethan's downfall was brought home to me one evening when Mark called, his voice somber. "Have you heard? Ethan's been let go from his consultancy. Apparently, the firm wants to distance themselves from any controversy. I hadn't heard, and the news left me with a complex knot of emotions. Ethan had built his career on being the voice of reason, the insightful commentator who could unravel complex political landscapes with ease. Now he was voiceless, his fall from grace complete. It's a shame, I found myself saying, not just for Ethan, but for all that had been lost along the way. He had potential, Mark. He just lost sight of what was important. Mark agreed, the conversation drifting to other topics, but my thoughts remained on Ethan. In his relentless pursuit of success, he had sacrificed everything, including those who cared for him. His downfall was not just a failure of character, but a warning of the price of ambition unchecked by empathy or responsibility. As I hung up the phone, the finality of Ethan's situation settled over me. There was no joy in his loss, no sense of victory in his defeat. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement of the inevitable outcome of a life lived at the expense of others. Turning away from the window, I realized that while Ethan's story might have ended, mine was just beginning. Freed from the shadow of his deceit, I could finally start anew, building a future on my terms, defined not by the pain of the past, but by the promise of tomorrow.